Welcome. In this video we're going to be taking a quick look at Skadi, an epic grade tank class Elune. Looking at his base stats at 6 stars level 60, he has decent stats at 44k HP with 5.1k PDEF and 4.9k MDEF. 103 speed does put him on the lower end of the mid-range side, but still decently good, but his overall stats are pretty tanky. As he is transcended up to the max at +5, his HP does go up to a very decent 66.5k, with his physical and magic defense ending at 7.7 and 7.4k. This means that you can build him and make him pretty tanky if you give him good enough gear and you do his dimension slate on him. Looking in at his skills, his first skill is a front target only physical damage skill that does low damage as he is a tank and can only attack the frontline enemies. The skill, even after maxing it out, still only does moderate damage, but can be decent if you have him a little bit on an attack type build. Then he can do some decent damage if you have some decent attack stats on him. Looking at a special skill, this is a 4-soul skill. This one will deal magic damage instead of physical like his first skill, and does a nature effect that causes frostbite for 3 turns. Frostbite is nice as it is a debuff that will do continuous damage to the enemy as soul damage. This skill, as it is leveled up to the max at 6, does do significant damage. Even though he is a tank, it can hit quite hard, and the nature effect becomes 4 turns, meaning that the frostbite is quite deadly as it can be on the enemy for a long time, dealing significant damage to them if they are unable to heal. Even though this is a frontline only attack, it is good for taking down tanks as it is soul damage and it doesn't care what their stats are when it does the damage. His ultimate skill, this one, is again only a 4-soul skill, which is good. This skill does a physical effect that provokes all enemies for 2 turns. This is an AoE provoke, and it gains an enhanced buff that reduces the damage he receives by 5% of his max HP for 2 turns. If he is hit while this effect is active, there's a 100% chance of him inflicting a nature effect again for frostbite for 2 turns. This is quite good as it does make him quite tanky during the time that they're provoked, and it makes it so that if he does get hit, they frostbite themselves. This is very effective as he is very good at controlling and doing damage through soul damage to the enemies with the frostbite effect. As the skill is leveled up to a max at 6, the provoke still stays only at 2 turns, but the enhanced buff goes up to a 3-turn duration, and the damage reduction goes up to almost 10% of his HP at 9%, meaning that the damage reduction is pretty good, as that you would have to do more than that to be able to do any damage to him. So if you're fighting targets that do multi-hits, that do not hit very hard and have a lot of multi-attacks, the damage that they do to him will just be 0 because the damage is reduced by his max HP, so getting him with as much HP as possible could effectively make him take 0 damage from multi-hitting enemies. The frostbite still is only 2 turns from this, but since it is an AoE provoke and he applies it, it is something that is still good. Now let's look at his passives. The passives increases the damage dealt by 20% to anything that is frozen or has frostbite. This means that it just allows him to hit a little bit harder to those enemies, so when he does attack, that is good. His ultimate skill doesn't do any damage, which is also fine because that means you don't have to worry about any types of reflex from it or counter attacks. The second skill, though, this one reduces the damage he receives by 5% per enemy that's afflicted with frostbite or freeze. So if you're fighting a full team of 5 and they all have a frostbite or freeze effect on him, then he receives 25% less damage. It's at least going to be 5% for any of them if any of them have it, and stacking up 5% for each additional one. This one is quite nice as it does make him a little bit tankier and does reduce the damage that he receives. His third passive now, this is the one that you get at 6 stars. This one provides an immunity to frostbite and freeze effects when he is attacked. This one will also do 50% of reflecting a weakening effect back to the attacker, which means if someone does try to apply a weakening effect on him, he has a 50% chance of putting it back on them instead. This makes him, though nice, this passive, making him immune to frostbite and freeze, makes him quite good for dealing with things like the Elune, which you will see in UGD Arena a lot. And this is a place where he is very effective in, because he doesn't take up too much merit, and he is quite effective there, as he does have an AoE provoke with nice frostbite to do lots of nice soul damage to the enemies. So making him immune to the freeze effect, though, that means that he doesn't get frozen if he has buffs and they are stripped by the Elune. This means he doesn't get frozen, and anybody that tries to apply a weakening effect to him, since he's going to be a front line, which is going to be a lot, then that means that he has a 50% chance of just reflecting that effect back to the attacker and not taking it at all. It's only a 50% chance, so you do have to be careful, and you can still get the debuff on you. Looking in at his skill gems, the first skill gems on his first skill, 5% chance to frostbite the target for 1 turn. This is a pretty decent idea. You might as well go with it, as it is a physical damage skill. Going with the red, orange on the gems here does give him an additional chance to frostbite the target on even his basic skill, meaning that he has a chance to frostbite on pretty much everything that he does. His second skill, the special skill, 5% chance to freeze the target for 1 turn. As this is a nice, decently hitting skill, you can go for it, as it is magic damage. The magic, and then crit rate on it isn't a bad idea anyway to go with. However, you can, if you just want more damage, you can go with the full blue gems, or if you just want to increase that crit rate, go full orange. However, the balance here, the blue, and orange, does make them quite nice, and the 5% chance to freeze does add a little bit more to them. Now, when you're looking in at the last skill, the ultimate skill restores 1 soul with a 10% chance. This one can be good, can be bad, but it is only a 10% chance, so probably going with the 2 yellows, and probably a 3rd yellow is going to be a good option for him, making sure that that buff to himself for reducing damage is even better. This means that it is even less likely that he takes any damage from anything. This means you can build him on a fairly tanky build, and there's a good chance that anybody that multi-hits is not going to be doing any damage to him at all, making him very tanky and hard to deal with in the front line, unless they perhaps instant kill him. Looking at the dimension slate for him, this is something that you're going to want to focus on again. You're going to want to focus on getting those HP stats up as much as you can to make him tanky, but also his physical and magic defense. Again, the more that you get it up, the better. The HP is good, as it works very nicely with this ultimate skill, because it'll reduce the amount that the damage that he takes, or makes it more that they have to do before he takes any damage at all. So the higher the HP, the better that the ultimate skill works, and the less damage he takes because of the amount that it's reducing. So getting as much HP substats as you can on the Dimension Slate is going to be something you're going to want to roll for or re-roll for him if you plan on using him in a more competitive nature, especially in the UGD arena. The gear for him, a good tank set would be ideal for him. However, anything that gives him good PDEF, MDEF would also be good. So going with a good gear set for him that does that, like the Ulysses set here that gives him 100% PDEF and MDEF if he's hit by a crit. This will increase his tankiness, making sure to go with an HP in his offhand slot to give him as much HP as possible, and try to get as much HP as you can on subs with any PDEF and MDEF anywhere you can. The other thing that you're going to want to get on Dimension Slate and on his gear is accuracy. You're definitely going to need that accuracy to land those frostbites, and that's what you're going to be wanting to use him for, is landing those frostbites on the enemy team. You want him to do that. For me, right now, this is just a gear set I was using to play around with him with, and I have a partial set. I have the Ulysses set, and I have a full moon set to give him that 25% debuff inflict rate, and then also the Ulysses set to make him a little bit tankier. This set does work effectively on him. However, I would rather go with a tank set on him instead of the Ulysses set, but the full moon set is still a good set to use, as it is quite nice. Especially even just the necklace for the full moon set, as it does increase your chances of landing a debuff by 5% just from having that one piece of gear. Skadi overall is a pretty good epic tank. He can be quite tanky and he can be very annoying to deal with, especially with those frostbite debuffs and that AoE provoke. That provoke can be quite good for him as it reduces the damage that he takes, and you can really mess up an enemy team with it, especially if you're going into a battle in UGD arena and you're going to be up against, let's say, one of the new Reapers that instant kills targets, and you're fighting one of those. You can use Skadi to go in there and provoke, meaning that the Reaper will have to target him every time, which is good because that just prolongs the chance that that Reaper is going to be able to use its ultimate skill on your backline target and instant kill it. This makes him pretty effective for doing that, and it makes it a little bit more of a chance to get you the chance to be able to kill the Reaper before you die. He's also quite effective at provoking other targets, so that way you can keep the damage onto him instead of someone else. This means that he is pretty effective as a control tank, which is his job. The fact that he reduces the damage by so much based on his HP with his ultimate skill, and it doesn't do any damage, meaning that it's just there to provoke and provide himself with a buff, is decent. Even though it doesn't do damage, that can be good, especially if you're fighting an Artemil, because the Artemil then doesn't hit him if he does his debuff. He just provokes, and that's the end of it. So Skadi is a pretty good tank. It is something that could be worth your time, especially if you do UGD Arena. He is good, but he can also be useful in other aspects of the game, especially in PvE too, where he does provide a nice tanking ability with his provoke and his frostbites for doing damage to like bosses. He is also particularly useful for using in the world boss fights. Anything where you have to land those effects that you need, he does apply those nature effects so you can land those frostbites, which means you can take care of those those side bosses pretty easily, because he is constantly landing that on them, especially if he uses his tanking skill. Just something else to keep in mind if you're looking for places to use him effectively, and he doesn't even have to be too tanky if you're using him just for world boss. That's going to be it for this one. If you have any questions or comments, leave them below and I'll answer them as soon as I can. Thank you.